out loud, and I'm going to do it here. So I'm going to read a little bit every time I stream, usually probably at the end of the stream, and I'm going to I'll separate these things out so they'll have their own little playlist and everything, so people can go back and listen to me, although it'll probably be on YouTube as opposed to here, which you can see the YouTube link right there. See? Right there. Okay, so let me do a stream marker, and I'm going to start reading. This is a copy I gave to my wife, and all the little bookmarks that you see are hers. Highlights. So I have a copy that's coming. I've sent it around to people who played a role in the making of the book to have them sign it and stuff. And that's going to be the copy that I go through and I write notes down inside, and it's just going to be a copy for myself. But for this, I'm just going to start using this one. So, all right. So, Chapter 1. Paper. I suppose this all started with paper. Real paper. I could not recall the last time I'd seen a fresh batch of it. That close to the core, one rarely found supplies of this sort. They were hard to come by, even for researchers like me. Only the bare necessities for those sworn to protect. How many times had I had those words thrown in my face? Still, someone must have seen my request. How else had this package of crisp, white paper been delivered? The first thing I did was pull a piece free, hold it close to my nose, and inhale slowly. If I closed my eyes, the faint odor made me believe I was pressing my face close to a real tree standing before me, a soft breeze shifting my long hair around as it moved past. Well, I pictured what I thought was a tree. It was a pleasant dream. A cough interrupted my wandering thoughts. I quickly lowered the paper and opened my eyes, brushing a strand of my hair from my face. There in the doorway stood a figure I'd never seen before. He stood at least a full head taller than me, and I was considered tall at 172 centimeters. He wore long, flowing silver robes. A hood covered his head and a cowl most of his face. A slit cut across it revealed dark skin and black eyes, which were locked on me. My heart accelerated slightly, and a tingly feeling ran up my side to my chest. He hesitated in the doorway, hands clasped behind him. I tossed the paper behind me and bowed my head as my cheeks warmed, now wishing to stare at the strange figure waiting before me. "May I enter?" he asked, his voice deep and rough. I looked up and nodded. He stepped forward to the table that dominated the room's center, the door sliding shut behind him. "Feel free to stare," he muttered, his eyes roaming around the space. "I find it helps you lot get past the startled stage sooner." "Hello, Kate. Welcome to the reading." As his black eyes darted around, I felt self-conscious about the clutter. My eyes followed his around my messy office, taking in random articles of clothing, a hairbrush, a tin of moisturizer, and I wished I'd taken a few moments earlier in the day to tidy up a bit. "Your robes are an interesting choice considering the heat," I said, words racing out of my mouth. I closed my eyes tight and took a few deep breaths. "And a perpetual curiosity to you core lovers," the man said, moving to stand by the table holding the paper. "Quite a prize here." "Oh, thanks for that follow, Kate. Welcome to the Rat Pack." I must have looked confused, for the man arched an eyebrow and nodded at the table. When I looked around, all I saw was the paper. "This?" I asked. "Yes, it is. I have no idea where it came from, either." "Such a lovely day," the man said, moving past the table to stand near the room's lone window. "Join me? Seems a lot less windy than usual for this time of day, don't you think?" I didn't move. I had no idea who he was. My first thought was to move toward the door and not the window. "Caitlin?" I'm not sure if it's Kate or Caitlin like that. Welcome. Thank you for sharing. Those are some tough things you're facing there. I have ADHD also. I have social anxiety. I have depression, but it's more connected to the PTSD. So I understand some of that. My sister has dyslexia. My brother-in-law has dyslexia. So it's a lot of challenges. But hey, that's life's full of challenges, right? So welcome. You're welcome to hang out here. You can count on this being a safe space. We can talk about things. We can not talk about things. Whatever. Today, I just wrapped up RimWorld, slightly shorter stream today, and I'm doing a reading from my book on the recommendation of my wife and several others, because apparently I self-therapized when I wrote this. So feel free to ask questions, comment. This isn't one of those I just have to keep reading, because it's not like I'm doing a special recording where I just want to hear the reading. I can cut the video if I want to do that. So, Don't you agree, Logwin? He asked, nodding toward the window. About the wind? Seems very calm for this late in the day. The night shield will be up in a few crons. I turned my gaze to the window, puzzled as to why he would want to discuss the weather with me. In the distance, I spied another shell, too small to support a population, orbiting the core just below ours. Aware of the man standing next to me and his question, I searched for some kind of response. I settled on a nod and started to reply, then stopped. He'd called me by my name. Truth be told, he said, looking toward the door and dropping his voice to a low murmur, I'm not here to talk about the weather. I'm here to discuss that prize you just received. I moved back toward the desk that stood along one side of the room, my eyes narrowing. I gather you're getting suspicious right about now, he said, his voice still low. Good. Don't lose that. You're going to need it. How do you know my name? I asked. He smiled. If there's one thing you can count on everywhere, it's the bureaucratic urge to account for everything. He glanced around the room, taking in the table, my desk, and the wardrobe along the far wall. Especially who works in what office. You looked me up? I needed to find you, and frankly, you're the only one with that name in the index. Why? I moved around the table. He nodded at the door. Go ahead, the door's not locked. Who are you? I am a friend of your queen. He looked back out the window, as difficult as that may be to believe. The queen doesn't have friends. She hardly ever comes out of her cave anymore. He shrugged. So you don't know what she does or who she talks to? He smiled at me. Or who she is friends with. I bowed my head at him, conceding the point, and nodded at his garments. Those are not from our shell. Nor mine, I'm afraid, he said, shrugging. However, it's an effective disguise on most shells I visit. How? You stand out. That can't be what someone wearing a disguise wants. He chuckled. Down here, I'll grant you that much. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Up there, on other shells, you'll find these cloaks carry a lot of power and weight. He held up a hand. Not that I'm here to flaunt that power. I just didn't have time to change before I came. Why are you here? I asked, looking back at the paper. Right, let's get to the point. He stepped away from the window and picked up a single sheet of paper from the table. As I said, quite the prize. Getting this here was no small feat, I can tell you. I looked back and forth between the paper and the stranger. Pardon me, I said, holding his gaze. But isn't this a violation of the import codes? The man leaned close, his dark eyes turning to look at me as he waved me closer. It can't be a violation if it wasn't imported. I opened and closed my mouth several times, trying to fathom how else the paper might have come. Nothing got to this shell except from the Mattery forger or by import. Both of those required months of waiting to get anything beyond the necessities. An impressive bit of work this is. I can't recall ever seeing a single sheet in existence, and here she's made an entire stack of it. The first is the most complex, as you know. I'm sure if I tried it would take me 24 crons just to make the first sheet. He grinned at me. I'll wager she did it in 12. I stared, my mouth hanging open slightly. 12 crons? At that point, I would have needed roughly 30 crons to duplicate one sheet from the completed pattern, and whoever had done this had made one from scratch in half a day. Who? I asked again. You can't figure that one out? I shook my head. I can't think of anyone powerful enough to... I stopped, my eyebrows shooting up. The Queen. Sorry, that was meant to be a question. The Queen? He arched an eyebrow. The light dawns. I looked at the paper. We hardly ever see her anymore. Why would she make something like this? She made it for me, he whispered. That made me pause. I had only ever seen the Queen once in my lifetime, cycles in the past, the day I'd failed my test. It wasn't a happy memory for me. It was the only time I'd ever seen her in person. I'd hardly forgotten it. How long have you known her? For a very long time. He stopped speaking, his eyes locked on the piece of paper in his hand. Did she make all of these? I asked, finger running down the stack of paper. The stranger chuckled. No, once she had the original, duplicating is permitted with the matter reforger, I'm sure. He shook his head and waved the piece of paper at me. Still, I didn't come here to brag about the Queen's abilities, he said, placing the sheet back on the table. I have a task for you. He frowned, looking back out the window. Not an easy one, either. The stranger stood silent for a moment, his eyes glazed over. He shook his head and refocused on me, reaching into his robes. You know what this is, correct? He held out an object. I took it and discovered it was an envelope made from paper and sealed with what looked like a hard red substance. Inside you'll find instructions. He nodded at the envelope. I thought it was best to avoid using certain devices. What's in it is of a delicate nature. I turned it over in my hand and found my name written across it. You know how to write, correct? I looked down at the paper. Yes, but I won't have anything to write with much longer. I'm on my last pencil and it will take me much longer to make more. Pencils aren't high on the reforger priority list. The man smiled, held out a small cylindrical case and set it on the table between us. He nodded for me to take it. I think you'll find this more to your liking. Inside the case lay a finger-length cylindrical device made from solid metal. One tip ended in a point, the other rounded smooth. I held it up and shifted it to rest on my fingers like a pencil. Correct, it's a writing device. It doesn't have a name yet, but I'm told it's a never-ending pencil, for lack of something better, he said, pointing at the package that once held the paper. Try it out. It'll write on any surface. I drew a scripting symbol on the packaging, careful to leave the powerful construct incomplete so as not to cause some freak accident. The script looked wet at first, but it was dry when I brushed my finger across it. I tried it on the smooth metal table and found the same result. Do I want to know how long it took her to create this stylus? She didn't make that one, but I'll tell you who did now that you've named it, he said, stepping closer to the table and lowering his voice. I took it from someone who I am quite certain will be up in arms about it, especially if he hears you've given it a name. He burst out with a hearty laugh, the first emotion I'd seen from the man. Now here is where I leave you, but I must give you one word of warning. For this project, I'm sorry to say, you can't use the computers for any part. I looked up from admiring the stylus to stare at the stranger. I can't use the computers? I asked, looking behind the man. Had we been in most any other room, a large silvery display panel would have met my eyes, but not in this one. It was part of the reason I had chosen this space to work. To get away from the machines. To hide from the nagging feeling someone or something was staring at me from behind the panel. No, I'm afraid not. You haven't told me what it is you want me to do. He pointed at the envelope. Everything I can tell you is in there. I looked up at him. You never told me how you knew to look me up. He took in a deep breath and let it out. Some questions have to wait for their answers. The stranger turned to leave, but I called out to him. What's your name? He didn't answer. He walked out, the door sliding shut behind him. I turned the envelope over in my hand and stared at the red substance pressed to the side. I ran a finger over it. Whatever the stuff was, it had solidified and turned smooth. A single image lay compressed into the center. A single image lay compressed into the center. An O. A memory tickled on the edge of my consciousness, then flitted away. Shrugging, I used my fingernail to separate the substance from the envelope, freeing the flap. I pulled a piece of paper out and began to read. Logwyn, your queen needs your help. She is on the brink of a choice, one that has far-reaching consequences for us all. I do not believe she'll make the right choice in her current state of mind. She is about to send for you to request that you complete a task for her. When she does, you must tell her one thing when she asks if you will complete the task for her. Tell her you know her secret. The secret no one else knows. What that secret is hers to tell in her own time. She will challenge you. When she does, show her and only her the item I left on your table. I stopped reading and looked around. There sat a metallic box, the same color as the table. A single sheet of paper lay across it, blocking half the box from my sight. the paper the stranger had held. I looked back down at the paper. Show no one else what lies inside this box, not even yourself. Keep it secret from everyone save for the Queen. Only reveal you have it at your direst need. A friend. P.S. Do not trust any computer terminal you happen upon. I set the note aside and moved to stand over the box. It measured just longer than my arm from elbow to fingertip and a bit wider than my wrist. How I'd missed him placing it, I still don't know. A small magnetic clasp held it closed on one side. I moved to open the box, pausing to glance at the note. He said to show her what lies within. What could it be? My finger toyed with the clasp as I pondered what might lay inside. A moment later, a messenger appeared, delivering a summons to see the Queen. He found me standing over the still closed box. After he left, I eyed the summons and the note, my hand still resting on the metallic box. What did the strange man want? What did the Queen want? And why all this secrecy? It took me several months of work to find those answers, to find out that they boiled down to a friend caring for another and trying to help his friend recover from a loss. It took even more for me to understand the need for secrecy, to truly comprehend the danger the box in my possession brought with it. Not just to me, but to everyone. And not just danger, power. Had I known then the implications that box carried with it, I might have thrown it into the core. But at that moment, I didn't know any of that. I needed more information, and only one source lay open to me. Before I'd finished thinking the thought through, I found myself walking out the door, paper, stylus, and a still-closed box all tucked away safely in a travel sack. And that's where I'm going to stop for today.